In October 1986, a bus carrying 10 elementary school students vanished after turning into the Stellow Forest to avoid a detour that had been blocked off. No trace was found, no emergency call was made, no distress signal was sent. Every hypothesis led to a dead end. 30 years later, during an inventory of old files at an abandoned garage in Norr County, a repair invoice slipped out from between some payment slips. The date was clearly written October 10th, 2016. Vehicle owner Thomas W. School district number 84. The only note, the yellow paint must be preserved. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel to follow the trail of forgotten disappearances, because some names should never be buried. The town of Clybourne, Tennessee, a place with nothing remarkable on the map, merely a transitional zone between the arid southern plains and the fractured mountain ranges lining the northern plateau. Autumn arrived quickly here, as if time itself wanted to skip ahead and dive straight into winter. The roads were cracked, the brick walls faded, and the air always thickened when the fog rolled down from the Stellow Forest. Locals called that forest the Gray Curtain not because it was haunted, but because light always seemed to stop at the tree line, unable to pass through. In 1986, just as the leaves began to fall, a different kind of silence settled over the town, not one born of nature, but of 10 names that were never spoken again after that morning. Nearly 3 decades after the disappearance, no one in town spoke of the 10 children with any clarity. Old newspaper articles were pulled from the library. The school yearbook from that year was missing pages. And at the first memorial, held in 1987, not a single parent stepped forward to speak. Only one person still carried the children's names like carvings on the palm of her hand. Elora Venn, the silver-haired woman who always sat in front of the old school gate every Friday afternoon at the exact hour the missing bus was supposed to bring the students home. In 1986, Elora was only 14 years old. Her older sister, Nemia, was one of the 10 children on that bus. No one clearly remembered why Nemia, a 5th grader, was on board that day. The family had only received a notice that the school was organizing a make-up field trip for shortened classes. No one had been warned in advance, and no consent form had been signed. And when the bus didn't return, no one stepped forward to take responsibility. The homeroom teacher said there had been no shortened classes that day. The school administration claimed there had been no field trip planned. And the driver, a man named Thomas Weller, left behind no message, no final communication. The Venn family lived on the eastern edge of town, where the land began to slope into low hills before reaching the Stellow Forest. Elora remembered the final image vividly, a yellow-painted bus. Number 12, turning at Dusting Ridge Bend, then vanishing behind a row of birch trees. On the window, Nemia had her cheek pressed to the glass, waving her hand as if she somehow knew there would be no next time. Nemia's room was kept exactly as it had been for 10 years. Then, after Elora's parents died in a car accident, an incident officially ruled as caused by fog obscuring visibility, she lived alone in that house, surrounded by memories and voiceless echoes. One corner of the wooden cabinet still held Nemia's sketchbook childish drawings that were nonetheless haunting a sun falling into the forest, faceless human figures, and the same school bus drawn over and over, each time with one detail changed. In 2016, when Elora was in her 40s and working as a local librarian, she was assigned to oversee the transfer of documents from decommissioned public facilities, including a maintenance garage for school district number 84 that had been abandoned since 2003. It was the first time in nearly 30 years that anything had truly stirred in that frozen case. Amid the moldy records and unread invoices, Elora flipped open an old envelope tucked into a batch of receipts, dated October 10th, 2016, just 10 days prior. The repair sheet listed fuel line replacement, steering reinforcement, engine inspection, vehicle model International Harvester, 1985. License plate a match with bus number 12, the final note, the yellow paint must be preserved. Elora could not make sense of it. For 30 years, the vehicle had never been located, no signal, no footage, no transfer report. So who had brought it in for repairs? Who had written the date on that invoice? She didn't go to the police. Instead, Elora returned to the old house, opened Nemia's notebook, and began to revisit each drawing. One page in the middle held her gaze for a long, silent moment in the image. A bus sat still in the forest, door open, and a figure in a baseball cap stood facing the artist. At the bottom corner of the page, written in a slanted hand, "Next time, don't wave." The next morning, Elora drove to the address listed on the invoice, a garage called Blenner's Auto, situated at the northern edge of Nor County, nearly 60 miles from Clybourne. The old wooden sign was still hanging, though the letter B had peeled halfway off. The site had been officially closed since 2003 due to a public land dispute, yet the building had never been torn down. The front roll-up door was only partially shut, as if someone had just entered and left in haste. Inside, everything was coated in dust. The scent of rubber and old engine oil still lingered faintly in the air. Elora walked slowly past each workbench, each rusted metal shelf, trying to picture a mechanic working there unseen, unheard. In the back room, she found a steel pinboard used to tack up old invoices. Behind the board, there was an unusual dent in the wall. Elora traced it with her fingers and discovered a narrow gap. She pried it open to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside was a thick leather-bound notebook, dark and untitled. Inside were hundreds of handwritten entries, all vehicle maintenance notes, but without names, license plates, or specific dates. Only a single symbol was repeated on every page, a black circle with 3 slashes piercing through the center like a 3-spoked wheel. This symbol, Elora had seen it before, in one of Nemia's sketchbook pages. She photographed every page with her phone and left the garage as the sun rose high. No police, no supervision, and no sign that anyone had been there recently except for a single wildflower, still fresh, lying in the center of the concrete floor, as if it had just dropped from beneath a vehicle. Back at the library, Elora spent the entire night digging through school district records. Bus number 12, model International Harvester, was acquired in 1985, exactly 1 year before the disappearance. The assigned driver was Thomas Weller, a man with a prior record for threatening behavior in 1978, though never convicted. His records vanished after 1986. No death certificate, no address, no indication of where he had gone. In the photo archives, Elora found a single picture of bus number 12. The background was the school's parking area, but something made her pause for a long time in the reflection of the rear window. A symbol appeared, a round emblem with 3 diagonal slashes stuck to a power pole a few meters away. It wasn't the school's emblem, nor part of any traffic system, nor associated with any known community campaign at the time. Elora began revisiting Nemia's drawings again. This time, she looked more closely. In 6 of the bus sketches, the 3-slash symbol appeared 5 times, once on the wheel, once on the driver's uniform, and once etched on the forehead of the girl being drawn. The clues were beginning to form not a direction, but a rhythm, a cycle. Elora couldn't explain it, only felt a chill deep in her spine as she began to sense that this thing didn't originate from any single person. It resembled a mechanism, one that operated silently beneath all the layers of everyday life. That night, as she lay down, Elora heard a faint sound at the upstairs window. She didn't get up to check, nor did she turn on the light. But when dawn broke, she stepped onto the porch and found a distorted object lying at her doorstep, a shard of mirror, carved into a rectangular shape. On its scratched silver surface, 3 short diagonal gashes had been etched rough, deep, and cut straight to the core. Elora didn't go to the police, partly because she knew that after so many years, the case had become nothing more than a dead file. But deeper than that, there was a quiet certainty inside her that the police would find nothing at all. What she was stepping into didn't exist on any ordinary map. That morning, Elora drove toward Dusting Ridge, the final bend where bus number 12 was last seen before turning into the Stellow Forest. It was a narrow road, sloping downward and worn away by roots and rain. She had to leave her car and continue on foot. The air in the forest was thick like wax. Every sound seemed trapped beneath the canopy. Elora walked by memory, each step a ripple stirring from 1986. She remembered the last glimpse of the bus, the hollowness in her chest when it never came back, and the final look from Nemea through a fogged-up window pane. Suddenly, she stopped. Right in front of her stood a large, scorched tree stump on its center, a faint, circular carving, nearly identical to the 3/ symbol. Elora reached out and touched it, feeling the surface etched as if by a fine metal blade. Beneath the carving, someone had scrawled a line in paint. "This is not an approved route." She pulled out her phone to take a picture, but when she checked the photo, the screen showed only a strange dark blur. No tree, no writing, just a featureless gray field that refused to focus. Elora turned to leave, but before she had gone far, she spotted a narrow gap half covered by tree roots. She knelt down and brushed away the decaying leaves. It was a rusted metal culvert, with a round iron cover bearing no familiar symbol, only a crudely hand-etched number 318. She recognized it immediately. 318 was the route number listed on the repair invoice. But Route 318 had never existed in Clybourne. She tried to lift the manhole cover, but it wouldn't budge. Only when Elora stepped back a few paces did something strange occur. Sunlight broke through the canopy, bounced off the metal surface, and flashed directly into her eyes. In that fleeting instant, the reflection shimmered like a face, indistinct, just the shape of a child, wearing round glasses, with eyes that were watching. Elora dropped to the ground. Her heart raced wildly. She didn't dare look at that cover again. That night, she returned to the library and opened the historical geography maps of the Clybourne region. After several hours, she uncovered something peculiar in a map printed in 1962. There was a narrow route cutting through the Stellow Forest all the way to the Nor County border, a road labeled Line Route 318, but in every map printed from 1970 onward, that road was entirely gone, as if it had never existed. Elora compared the maps, tracing the length of the old route. There had been 3 intersections: a decommissioned schoolyard, an abandoned educational warehouse, and an old student radio station on the town's western edge. All 3 were removed from the district registry in 1987, the year following the disappearance. Under the desk lamp, Elora marked those 3 points in red ink: 3 arrows, 3 points of contact, and at the center was Dusting Ridge, the place where the bus vanished. She could no longer deny it. Route 318 did exist, perhaps not in any official records, but it existed within a hidden system, a transfer route designed for a purpose students were never meant to know. 3 days later, Elora arrived at the first location, Delgrave Schoolyard, abandoned since 1988 after a minor fire that caused no casualties. The entire site had been sealed off by the school district, surrounded by rusted steel fencing, a crooked no-entry sign dangling from one corner. She crossed the barrier through a back path, where vines had rotted through the barbed wire. The grounds were blanketed in dry leaves. The burn marks from years ago were still visible on the eastern wall, but the anomaly lay to the west, a stretch of wall, blackened brick with no windows, no doors, just a rough surface hastily plastered over, as if to conceal something. Elora ran her hand across the wall. Her fingers froze. In one corner, 3 bricks up from the bottom, there was a narrow slit just wide enough for a slip of paper. She took out her pocket knife, gently chipped away at the mortar, and pulled out a flat, thin object, an old student ID card, fogged with age and caked in thick mold. The name printed on it, Elora Venn. She stood still, frozen. In the dim light filtering through the cloud cover, the ID card caught a faint hairline crack along the edge and in one corner. The 3/ symbol was embossed so subtly it was invisible unless tilted at just the right angle. Elora didn't cry. She only held the card tightly, as if afraid it would vanish the moment she let go. The second location was Education Warehouse Number 7, once used to store teaching equipment in the 1970s. The front entrance had been welded shut, but the rear wall had a rotting wooden window. She slipped through easily, bringing only a flashlight and the student card she had just found. Inside was a maze of collapsed metal shelves, old benches, and dust as thick as a curtain. In the far corner, she found a locked filing cabinet, its metal corroded through. With minimal force, Elora pried it open. There were no documents inside, only a single VHS tape labeled in marker field loop 318, Session B. There was no player on site. Elora took the tape home and loaded it into an old VHS player her father had kept. The screen buzzed with static, flickering. But after a few seconds, the footage appeared a yellow school bus, moving slowly through the forest. There was no narration, no music. The camera appeared to be positioned at a high angle, like a surveillance feed, but no one knew who was filming. The next scene showed the bus stopping. One child stepped off, then two, then three. 10 children in total. No driver appeared on screen. The children lined up in front of a metal hatch that opened from the ground. On its surface was the 3/ emblem. The strangest moment came at the 43rd second. One of the children turned around and looked directly into the camera. The face was blurry, indistinct, but Elora knew with the instinct only family can possess that it was Nemea. Right after that gaze, the screen distorted heavily, then went completely black. Elora sat motionless before the blank screen, feeling as though she had glimpsed a door that should never exist. She rewound the tape once more, but this time, nothing appeared. Only white noise and prolonged static. 3 pieces of evidence: the student ID, the embossed symbol, and the videotape were no longer mere clues. They confirmed something real. Route 318 had once existed, had once operated, and had been documented by an unofficial system. A system someone was still trying to hide. That night, Elora couldn't sleep. In her dreams, she heard the sound of a bus engine crawling slowly past her bedroom window. No headlights, no horn, only the heavy grind of wheels over old gravel, as if someone was retracing a journey long forgotten. The next morning, Elora arrived at the final location on her map, WCLB school radio station, which once broadcast internally to schools across the Clybourne region during the 70s and 80s. The small red brick building stood alone in a wild meadow, with no clear path leading to it. The grass had grown waist-high. She had to follow a narrow trail, nearly swallowed by nature. The front door was locked, but the rear one was not. Inside, it was pitch dark, with only slivers of light slicing through gaps in the roof like thin blades. In the control room, Elora found a frequency board disconnected from power, but strangely, the tuning dial looked new, with smudges of oil still visible on its surface. She flipped the main transmitter switch. No lights came on, but after several adjustments, sound crackled through white noise, followed by static bursts, then a long stretch of distortion. Elora was about to shut it off when a woman's voice came through, very faint, very distant, but unmistakable. "We never left. It's just that no one remembers how to say the names." She stepped back, heart pounding. That voice. It wasn't an illusion. It repeated. Exactly the same. Like a pre-recorded loop. Elora tuned back to the frequency and marked it in pencil, 118.7 MHz. She recorded the transmission on an old tape recorder, then continued searching. In the station's storage room, she found a locked metal box. The lock was rusted but intact. Using a crowbar, Elora pried it open. Inside were dozens of unlabeled cassette tapes. She took one and played it on the station's old player. At first, only background static, but around the 3rd minute, a repeated exchange surfaced. Arrival confirmed. Route 318 is standing by. "No names, no return. Preserve final image. This time." Elora felt a true chill down her spine. No names, no return. Exactly how every record of that bus trip had been erased. And preserve final image that might explain the VHS tape's existence. A recording, a trace. She brought the cassette home and digitized the audio. That night, beneath a dim desk lamp, Elora turned back to Nemea's sketchbook. Near the final pages was a line she had overlooked before, "If I forget your name, Let me hear 118.7. Nemia had known, had seen, had documented. Elora closed the notebook and looked toward the window. She no longer felt panic, only a cold, focused resolve. She understood now Route 318 wasn't just a road. It was a system, whether physical or psychological. It had structure. It had operations. And it had once accepted passengers. She revisited the notebook, the audio, the maps, and the ID card. All evidence revolved around a single axis, the origin point of the route. And there was one thing no one had done since 1986: trace the path in reverse, from end to beginning. Elora remapped the route that way, and then something unexpected emerged: a perfect triangle, with Dusting Ridge at the lower vertex and the radio station and schoolyard forming the other two. At the center of the triangle, calculated by simple coordinates, was an unmarked area in the Stellow Forest, a blank space with no access roads, no construction records, and no clear satellite data. Elora circled the zone, and in the notebook's margin, she wrote Station 0, where everything stops. Elora decided to return to the Stellow Forest this time, not merely to search for clues, but to walk into the center of the triangle. That area had no trails, no GPS signal. She brought a compass, paper maps, backup batteries, and one thing she had kept with her from the beginning: the student ID card of Nemia. In the misty morning, Elora began her journey from Dusting Ridge, following the symmetrical axis toward the center. Each step grew heavier, as if the space around her were thickening. The forest trees changed color from gold to gray, and the light seemed suspended, as though every sunbeam had lost its direction. By noon, she reached a sunken clearing, bare, flat, with no grass, no stones, only tightly packed soil as if trampled hundreds of times. At the center lay a circular concrete slab, the size of a bus wheel. No symbols, no doors, only a shallow spiral groove etched into the surface, visible only from a certain height. Elora stood still. She placed the student ID at the spiral's center. In that instant, the air shifted. A headwind rushed in from every direction. No sound, no birds, not even the rustle of leaves. And then a voice spoke behind her, not loud, not clear, just a thin breath, saying one sentence: "You're going the wrong way." Elora turned. No one was there, but the student ID was gone. She knelt, hands trembling as she traced the concrete surface. The spiral groove had vanished. In its place was a new line of text, faint and shallow, as if scratched with a fingernail. Do not preserve the image. No photos, no recordings. She packed away her camera, her recorder, every device. Then she stood and followed the direction of the wind. She walked. She didn't know for how long. Only that the trees began to change shape. Their canopies rose higher, straight as columns, and every trunk was unnaturally smooth, scraped clean by some unknown mechanism. On each one, a mark was carved, the 3-slash circle, and beneath it, scattered letters: M, V, E, T, A, R, K. A word unclear, incomplete. Elora began writing it down when she saw, up ahead, a small iron shed. The door was unlocked. She stepped inside. The room was empty except for a low table and a dust-covered photo album. When she opened it, Elora froze. Each page held a photograph of a student specifically, the 10 children who disappeared in 1986. Every child was posed alone. The background identical, a copper-colored metal door, unmarked. Strangely, the photos had no dates, yet all the children bore the same expression: eyes wide, gaze tilted slightly to the left, mouths parted as if about to speak. The final page contained a blurry photograph, showing only the body of a child in a Clybourne school uniform, stepping through the metal door. The face was obscured, the gender unclear, but on the uniform badge was a name: E. Venn. Elora's head spun. She had never worn that uniform. Never attended that grade, but the photograph was unmistakably her at the same age Nemea had been. She turned the photo over and read the inscription, reinstating transfer loop, version 318B. Just then, the sound of an engine rose from the distance. Not fast, not yet close, but familiar enough to steal her breath. The bus, or at least a version of it, was coming back. Elora did not run. She stood still in the gray forest, still holding the photo album in her hands. The engine's sound grew closer, then suddenly went silent as if it had never existed. Nothing remained but a silence so thick that even movement seemed suspended in the air. A soft click echoed behind her. She turned. A copper-colored metal door identical to the one in the photographs was slowly opening from within the ground, where only a blanket of fallen leaves had been before. There were no stairs, just a gentle slope downward like the mouth of a bunker. And in that darkness, a faint blue light flickered. Elora stepped down. The air below was cold and dry like a storage vault. The smell of rust mingled with something ancient, the scent of rotting paper, half-burned film reels, and melted rubber. She followed the flicker of light and stopped in front of a cassette recorder placed on a dust-sunken metal table. Beside it lay a detached headphone. No one else was there. No other door. But as Elora put the headphone on, the tape began to play. A voice spoke. "Elora, if you're hearing this, it means you've walked the full loop." She froze. It was Nemea's voice, not from childhood, but matured, measured, tired. They didn't keep us with chains. They held us with repetition, by making memory flow backward, like a road with no signs. Do you remember the spiral at Dusting Ridge? That's the anchor point. Everyone leaves something there. Those who remember their names escape. Those who forget. The loop begins. Elora gripped the headphones tighter. Cold sweat traced down her back. She had never told anyone about the spiral. But Nemea knew. You were part of that trip once. Elora. But I pushed you out. I chose to keep you outside. They let me pick one person in exchange for a chance to keep my name. And I chose you. Elora collapsed to her knees, trembling. Broken pieces of memory began to rise, suppressed images, a narrow corridor, a hand gripping her wrist tightly, and someone whispering in the dark, "Don't wave again. I won't have time to look back. If you still remember my name, say it. Don't write. Don't record. Call it." The headphone went silent. But within the bunker, a sound began to emerge not from any device, but from the walls themselves, children's voices. The voices of 10 children. We never left. We were only waiting to be called. Elora said nothing, but her lips began to move. She didn't shout. She only whispered, "Nemea." Immediately, the blue light went out. The bunker plunged into total darkness. No sound, no running tape. Only a single faint trail of light glowing along the ground, like a scratch leading upward, toward the open door. Elora followed the light. Each step felt like walking through her own memory. A spiral of old images, an outstretched hand behind a bus window, the sketchbook with its message, the rusted door, and the blurred photo bearing her name. When she emerged from the earth, the sky had turned violet. Wind from the forest blew in reverse, and the engine's sound returned not from afar, but just behind her. She turned one final time. The yellow school bus number 12 stood silently in the forest, without a driver. Its door was open. Inside, there was nothing, except for a single old backpack, hanging from the rearmost seat, stitched in red thread, N. Venn. Elora did not step onto the bus. She simply stood and looked at the backpack embroidered with Nemea's name like the final marker of someone who once existed, once studied, once sketched spirals as nameless reminders. She took out her phone snapped a photo of the bus's license plate, then deleted it immediately. Do not preserve the image. The old warning echoed like a blade through time. She picked up the backpack and left the forest, never once looking back. In her mind, everything was no longer a series of clues, it was a mechanism, a system of retention, not built from prison walls or restraints, but from loops, looping journeys, looping memories, looping choices, back home. Elora laid out everything again: the student ID, the notebook, the maps, the radio frequency, the VHS tape, the photographs, and the recording from the bunker. Each item a cog in a larger machine, operating with a single purpose: to keep people suspended in forgetfulness. Only one lead remained untouched: the person who had initiated the system. She returned to the 1986 driver's records: Thomas Weller, the man who vanished along with the bus. But according to Noor County's 1975 educational records, a man by the same name once taught at a vocational school, specializing in electrical engineering and low-frequency signal transmission. Thomas Weller had not merely been a driver. He had designed the internal radio systems for 3 schools in Clybourne. In a closed meeting in 1983, he proposed a rotational student relocation access program, but it was rejected for unclear language and lack of transparent safety protocols. He was reassigned but continued working for the district as a data transit system maintenance officer. Elora tracked down his former address in Morrow County. The house was abandoned, but neighbors still remembered. He lived alone. No one came. No one left. But every Thursday night, there was always the sound of transmitters. She broke in through the back door. Nothing inside but a machine room filled with old equipment cassettes, radio transmitters, magnetic reels, control boards, and a wall covered in maps. At the center of the wall, the familiar symbol, a circle with 3 slashes, but this time with a handwritten note beneath it. 3118 is not a route number. 3118 is a differential coordinate. Elora traced the symbol, measured the map, and indeed, the 3 nodes of the system formed a triangle with an angle of 31.8 degrees, a deviation from Tennessee's standard longitudinal axis. That deviation was not a mapping error. It was the basis for slipping out of the frame of reality. Thomas Weller had created Route 318 as a mechanism to move students outside the conventional frame of reference, to hold them in a zone without time, without age, without a way to be named unless someone broke the loop. On his desk, Elora found a thick handwritten ledger. The first page read, "Only those who carry someone else's name can see the map." Inside were technical diagrams mixed with childlike sketches. But at the very end, there was a list: 10 names, including Nemia, and at the bottom, one final blank entry. Next to it, next iteration EV. Elora knew that was her. Weller was no longer alive. He had died in 2004 from a stroke, with no relatives and no official death certificate. But the system he built continued to operate because no one had ever stopped it. No one until now. Elora knew exactly what could break the loop: to call the true name of someone who had been held at the point of origin. No notes, no recordings, no devices. Only a spoken call, clear and honest. She returned to the Stellow Forest, bringing Nemia's backpack, Thomas Weller's notebook, and the shard of mirror engraved with the 3 slashes to serve as a contact cipher. She carried no phone, no camera, no image recording device. She stepped once more into the concrete circle at the center of the triangle, where all signals vanished. Dusk had begun to fall. The ground was freezing. Elora stood at the center of the spiral, eyes closed, one hand resting on the backpack. Then she spoke. Not loudly, not shouting, just a small, clear, and precise. Call Elora Venn. Silence. No answer. No strange light. Only the wind sweeping through the forest, and the fierce pounding of her heart. She repeated it. "Nemia, it's me." Suddenly, A soft sound behind her like something settling on the ground. Elora turned. A sketchbook. Nemia's sketchbook was lying in the center of the spiral. She had never brought it, but it was there. The cover drawn in colored pencil. The final sketch, a school bus pulling to a stop. A child stepping down, waving toward someone behind. Elora opened to the last page. Below the drawing, there was an italic line. The one who keeps their name will be the last to leave. And just beneath it, Elora, you remembered. She cried. Not with wailing, not in grief, just tears falling quietly, like dew after rain. Because in that very moment, the loop cracked. She felt it, not with sound, not with light, but with a slight shift in the air. Like an invisible door closing behind her. Like a system coming to a halt. The darkness in the forest was no longer dense. The tall trees began to regain color. The night sky faded from deep violet to a soft gray, like mist beginning to lift. Elora turned to leave. Each step grew lighter. The sensation of being held back was gone. No more pressure from invisible space. When she reached the forest's edge, she saw a figure standing there. It was a girl around 11 years old, wearing the old Clybourne elementary uniform. Shoulder-length hair, holding a sketchbook. She didn't speak, didn't smile, just looked at Elora for a long time, then reached out her hand. Elora stepped forward, took the girl's hand. The hand was cold, but it had a pulse. No words were spoken. But in that moment, every sound from 1986, the bus door shutting, the wheels grinding over gravel, the unanswered call of a name faded away. She brought Nemia home. No one in town remembered the girl's name. No one recognized the face as belonging to one of the missing students. But when Elora brought her to the library, something strange occurred. The student records from 1986 suddenly reappeared in the system. And in a scanned yearbook page, there was a photograph 10 children sitting together, all looking in the same direction. Elora recognized it. It was the photo she'd seen in the album. But this time, there were 11 children. The last one on the far right was Elora herself. She had no memory of ever being there. But somehow, the system had brought her back to close the loop, to return the final name that had been cut away. Elora never told anyone what had happened in the forest. She spoke nothing of the metal door, never mentioned the concrete spiral or the name that was spoken aloud. She simply re-registered the student file for Nemia, as though the girl had just returned from a long, inexplicable journey, without documents, without explanation. But Clybourne began to change, subtly, quietly, as if the silence that had once encased the town had begun to show fractures. One Monday morning, the head librarian found a missing archive book suddenly back on the shelf, though no one had requested or restored it. Inside was the student list for Clybourne Elementary, class of 1986, 10 names complete, along with the class photo Elora had once seen in the album. Only one thing was different. The photo now showed 11 students. And the 11th, farthest right in the corner, had a clearly printed name, Elora Venn, supplementary participant, non-academic term. No one understood what supplementary participant meant. There was no record code for such a designation. But no one removed the page. No one questioned it. As if the town had quietly decided, if something has returned, let it remain. To the north of town, the WCLB radio station resumed broadcasting for the first time in 30 years. No one knew who operated it, but every Wednesday night at exactly 10:16 p.m., the time the bus once turned into the forest, a short melody would play, piano notes scattered slowly, repeating an unfinished tune. Rumors began to spread that an old student had returned to find their classmates, that the bus was still buried underground, that Dusting Ridge was a temporal transfer point. Elora confirmed nothing. She simply returned to the library each day, documenting carefully, taping together fragments of old maps, and tracing over every pencil mark from Nemia with black ink so it would never fade again. Nemia lived quietly. She did not recall the time that had passed. She did not remember where she had been. But every night, she opened her sketchbook and repeated a single image bus number, 12, turning away from the forest, and with each new drawing, one small detail changed. The number of students on the bus increased by 1. With every sketch, another figure was added. By the 13th drawing, Elora stopped her. "I think that's enough." Nemea didn't reply. But that night, for the first time, the radio broadcast played the entire melody. The tune ended on a broken chord as if someone had lifted their hands from the keys, no longer needing to keep time. The next morning, Elora received a small package with no sender. Inside was the first mirror shard she had ever received, now perfectly clear, with the 3 diagonal slashes gone. On the back, a single line was etched by hand. "We were not held. We were waiting for someone who knew how to call us by name." One late autumn afternoon, Elora returned to Dusting Ridge, the place where everything had begun, and where everything had remained frozen for 3 decades. The forest wind drifted softly by, no longer bitter, but carrying the scent of soil, of decaying leaves, and a feeling, as if this place could finally breathe. She sat by the roadside, facing the spot where the bus had once turned and vanished. Her hand rested on the ground, where fresh blades of grass brushed gently against her fingertips like a whispered touch. Elora closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she did not see faces. She saw names. Names that had seemed erased from every record, every memory, every story now returning, clear and whole, as if they had never left. Nemea, Callan, Ia, Dorson, Avari, Merrill, Kenna, Tavir, Noor, Silen, and one final name, not part of the original list, but written back in black ink. Elora. The circle had closed. The circle. But the question still hung in the forest air. How many Route 318s had ever existed? How many buses never turned back? How many children were still waiting to be called, not by device, not by code, but by name? No one knew. But if one day you receive an old photograph with no clear origin, showing children looking back over their shoulders, look carefully into their eyes, because they might not be looking at the photographer, they might be looking at you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If you found this video meaningful, please like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel to support the journey of uncovering forgotten truths.